The iPhone 15 is not a phone that I thought would win my heart, especially considering Apple really hasn't been giving that starting lineup a lot of love recently. But with the inclusion of Dynamic Island, some changes to the camera sensors, and the updated matte glass on the rear, as well as the plethora of other changes, I think the iPhone 15 is honestly a killer value for a lot of people. When I took the phone out of the box, I was pleasantly surprised by how light and compact the iPhone 15 is, especially after using much larger phones in recent years. That, in combination with the frosted glass, overall made this phone feel incredibly premium while still being comfortable to handle on a daily basis. I think it's somewhat obvious by now that I'm someone who likes larger phones, but actually having tried to downsize in the past to the 13 mini, I think the iPhone 15, for what you get, is a really nice compact breath of fresh air. Before we get into it though, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. I just want to say thank you all so much for the support that you've been showing me on the channel over the last couple of days. It really does mean a lot. And anyways, let's just go ahead and get right back into it. For $800, you're getting a steal, minus a couple things which we'll get into a little bit later. Promotion. The iPhone 15 is equipped with last year's Pro chip, the A16 Bionic, which, don't get me wrong, is still an absolute powerhouse to this day. The A16 Bionic can handle pretty much any mobile game or task you decide to throw at it, and everything that you do on this phone is going to feel incredibly snappy. There hasn't been a moment where I thought, dang, like this thing could really use some extra performance, because if I'm being honest, the A16 Bionic is still just as, if not more powerful than some of the mobile SoCs out there, only really being rivaled by the iPhone 15 Pro with the A17 Pro chip. I've had a blast playing my favorite mobile titles on this phone like Call of Duty Mobile, and there isn't a sliver of an issue that I've run into. Thankfully, once again, just like the iPhone 14, the base storage configuration starts at 128 gigabytes, leaving plenty of room for most people to store lots of photos, videos, and other content. I cannot believe that Apple only started doing that last year. On the front of the iPhone 15, you have a pretty nice display. It's a Super Retina XDR OLED display supporting HDR10 and topping out at a peak brightness of 2000 nits. It's a really vivid and vibrant display that makes all of the content that you view on it look great. It's also protected by Apple's ceramic glass, although I would still recommend a screen protector because I actually have scratched the screen of my iPhone 15 Pro. Surprisingly though, I found the display to be quite bright, even when outdoors, and I'm glad that the base model iPhones have these solid panels, although it is lacking in the ProMotion department, which, if I'm being honest, is a pretty big deal to me. However, 60 Hz on this phone isn't the end of the world. And yes, there is a difference between a good 60 Hz display versus a bad one. And with the iPhone 15, I do believe this panel is quite smooth and responsive. Is it a deal breaker? To be honest, no. As someone who's been very critical and vocal about the fact that Apple has not put a 120 Hz refresh rate in this phone, I kind of understand, but like it still kind of sucks for the price point of this device. Like this $800 isn't cheap, and it would be nice to see, but at the end of the day, and it hurts me to say this, the people that are going to be buying this phone probably don't care, but it should still be there. Dynamic Island has made its first showing on the starting lineup though, whether you like it or not. It is nice to see this feature parity once again with all of the iPhones. After using Dynamic Island on the 14 Pro and the 15 Pro, I can actually appreciate the utility it adds to the phone, regardless of whether I think it's an eyesore or not. I mean, after all, it is housing the ambient light sensor and the Face ID sensor, as well as this f1.9 12 megapixel selfie camera with phase detection autofocus. And honestly, if you ask me, the quality of these cameras is pretty damn good. This is 4K 24 frames per second, and I think that it looks absolutely incredible when shooting on this front selfie camera. I can totally see myself being able to use this phone to actually vlog and make content for this channel. I am actually planning on using this iPhone 15 to shoot some day in the life content for this channel, so if that's something that you're interested in, let me know in the comments down below. I guess while we're on the cameras already though, we might as well go ahead and talk about those rear shooters. Yet another thing that's made its way down from last year's Pro lineup. On the iPhone 15, you get a 48 megapixel f1.6 wide main shooter and a 12 megapixel f2.4 ultra wide. And I have to say, the images coming out of this phone are really impressive. I think that the camera is something that should not be overlooked this year on the base model, and that I personally think if you're someone who's looking into getting into content creation, this could be a complete package for you. This is what 4K 30 frames per second looks like on the rear shooter of the iPhone 15, and honestly, it makes me scratch my head a little bit because I'm someone that spent a lot of money on camera equipment for this YouTube channel, and it blows my mind that this thing is capable of really being an all-in-one content creation toolkit. Like, it is incredible the value that you're getting out of this device. And for $800, it's honestly pretty crazy to me that you're getting this type of quality and this type of reliability when it comes to the video in the iPhone 15, while also still having a very powerful full-fledged smartphone. This is 2023, and it's crazy that phones are just like this now. The only real complaint that I have with this camera setup is the lack of a telephoto lens. Personally, I would have liked to see the ultra-wide swap for a 3x, or I mean, it's not realistic to ask, but a 5x telephoto lens. I think that with telephoto you get a lot more utility, but I can understand people wanting the ultra-wide, especially for group photos or for landscape photography, or just having something fun to play around with. But I don't use the ultra-wide much, and I personally would have just liked to see a nicer portrait camera. It's actually crazy that I made it this deep into the video though without talking about USB-C. I mean, what's confusing is that Apple was one of the first companies to implement this into their devices, yet somehow seemingly just forgot about it. Just kidding. We all knew that Apple was taking advantage of that MFI program for quite some time. Well, thanks to Apple, I mean, the EU, we finally have a USB-C port on the iPhone 15. Now, unlike the Pros, this doesn't support USB 3 speeds, only USB 2.0. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, and a lot of people are probably gonna hate me for saying this, but a lot of people aren't going to care. When it comes to the Pros, I feel like USB 3 is a necessity, especially for pro features like shooting ProRes to an SSD. That being said, it would have just been really nice to have, especially if you're someone who does plug your phone in a lot for data transfers, and say you don't have a Mac to be able to take advantage of AirDrop functionality. I just don't understand this intentional bottleneck, but I am happy that the USB-C does exist now in the iPhone. I will say though that it does charge decently fast. For me, it takes about 35 minutes to reach 50%, which isn't crazy, but it gets the job done. Thankfully, with this phone, that could be enough usage to get you through the day with very light use. I'm not talking about shooting video or playing games, but just very light tasks, as this phone only has a 3,449 milliamp hour battery, which I would say is honestly my only real complaint with this phone. That being said, it does support 15-watt charging with MagSafe and 7.5 watts with the Qi standard, so despite the battery being a bit smaller, at least you have various ways to juice it up when on the go, and hopefully due to USB-C, you'll have a lot more access to that cable when you need it. Speaking about something else though, the color that I decided to go for this year was the blue. And tell me if this looks blue to you. While I do like the pastel off-white look, I think it's just odd that there wasn't a straight up white option. And I also think it's quite weird that all of these colors are just lacking in saturation. However, I am a fan of the way this blue looks. Depending on the lighting, you either have a white phone or a baby blue iPhone 15, and it's a cool change of pace. I don't know why Apple's been so afraid of colors lately. Like, even the Pro model iPhones are all just super boring. Back to the build for a minute though, there was something that I glossed over, the alert slider. Unlike the iPhone 15 Pro lineup this year, the regular 15 doesn't have the new action button. And in a way, I actually prefer this, at least with the current implementation of the action button. I'm someone who thought the alert slider was an absolute must. I love this thing being on a phone. It is genuinely so useful to know what state your phone is in, and to be able to quickly turn on your ringer when you're expecting a call, and having that physical confirmation is just nice to me. Even with the action button, I'm using it as an alert slider. I would very much prefer it if we had the option to double tap or triple tap it to get more functions out of it, but that's just not how it works. Another thing is that unlike the iPhone 15 Pro, the build of the iPhone 15 is aluminum and not titanium. However, recently, this is looking to be like a good thing, as I've been personally having a lot of problems with my 15 Pro Max getting too hot, which could actually be attributed to the titanium not being such a good conductor. So in a weird way, it seems that Apple has somewhat dodged a bullet with the iPhone 15. Anyways, if I had to sum it up, I think that for $800, you're getting an incredibly solid phone with great cameras, best-in-class performance, and at the end of the day, for most people, I think that this is gonna do more than just the trick. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like down below, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.